Protect your car with 3W Liners all-weather floor mats. Made from durable materials like TPE and rubber, our mats are designed to withstand rain, snow, and mud with deep grooves to trap dirt and liquids. For a custom fit and advanced protection, visit 3W Liners. That's the number 3, WLINERS.com today.
Farmhounds offers natural treats and chews made with quality products that support family farms, regenerative agriculture, and humane farming practices. Give your dog the best with wholesome, organic ingredients that promote health and happiness. Shop now at farmhounds.com.
Frozen. Heroes, gonna tell you about frozen heroes, gonna tell you about
comic books, costumes,
facts, boots,
and other stuff.
In this week's issue, Superman for All Seasons, Part 1.
Welcome into Bros, Foes, and Heroes. I'm Zach, joined as always by the mighty man himself, Mr. Mike.
You know what I just realized?
What's that?
My shirt is the same color as my beard.
Today,
Look at that.
Yes.
Look at that. It's like the exact same. Like it is.
It is.
It's like
it is
it
a little
just
bit.
goes
Hold
right
on. I need
into
to
it.
make sure that I always switch us to the beginning.
Wow,
so if I look,
yeah,
we look at each other the right way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Nobody
It's
else
weird.
gets that joke, especially audio. But
Yeah, audio folks, just imagine.
that we were on one side of the screen and now we're on another side.
Well,
of the
also
screen.
the beard.
Oh,
comment.
the
They're
beard.
not
Yeah,
gonna
they don't get that
either.
either. You're
Yeah.
right.
I am very gray, and my shirt is very gray, and they're
It's
the
like-
same hue.
It's like it looks like pepper. Like when you like.
Yep.
There's no salt. It's just pepper.
That's me, just pepper.
Just pepper. This
Gotten
is
fired
Bros.
from many jobs because I'm just pepper.
Just pepper. This is Bros, Foes, and Heroes, a comic book podcast where I, Zach, usually tell Mike about a character or a story, arc,
does do
or just anything comic book related we talk about. Mike knows enough to be dangerous, I think is a good way to
That's
describe
about
his
right.
knowledge about
Mhm.
comics. And I am just a very inquisitive person who always loves to dive deeper into more things related to the subjects of comics. I've just always been, I think we've talked about this before, I've been a guy whose favorite show has been how it's made. I have always loved like the ins and outs and stuff. So plus I'm nerdy as hell.
I
So
love that too. I like to find out how things work.
yes, I'm very much like that. But one of the things that I am interested, I'll use that as a segue then of figuring out how things work, is I am really excited about the class of superhero movie that we have coming up here soon. And like mainly it being Superman, used to be Superman Legacy, and then Fantastic Four. I know that the Captain America movie came out, and I'm just kind of like,
Oh, that's right. It used to be called Superman Legacy, huh?
It was. They changed the name of it
Oh.
to just Superman. But I'm really intrigued by this, and I've also wondered, and I've had the thought of like, well, what did they use for inspiration? I know there were like set pictures sent out of times, or like I think James Gunn himself also made a video of like, hey, this is kind of the building blocks that we're using.
Well, he likes to send out those cryptic pictures too that reference
different things. Yeah. But one of them in the book, like I think they had like this guy where like, hey, this is what we're basing phase 1 off of. And it was like here, and it might not have been him related, and DC themselves might have just published
Right.
it. But I'm pretty sure that All-Star Superman is the story that they put, at least it's not going to be a lot like, and you'll see when we cover All-Star Superman, it's not going to be that story adapted to the big screen.
Right.
This is a James Gunn story on its own. I think it's just kind of showing us like that's the kind of Superman we're dealing with here.
Well, we also did think that the Supergirl movie that's coming up after
Now,
this
that one is
an
pretty much-
actual adaptation.
Yeah, like that one is they took Tom King's, like, I mean, or at least the people they're hiring. Obviously, they're taking some liberties away from the finished product of what we got, of like fleshing it out a bit more for a movie.
Well, I mean, shit, they're bringing in like the artist and the writer. or
Oh yeah,
something,
Tom
aren't they?
King
Yeah.
and Umbilicus
I mean,
Evelyn. Yeah.
I mean, that tells you they're getting pretty damn close.
Which, yeah, no, that's right.
You know?
That's a good point. But I don't know, like the story of All-Star Superman when we cover it, because we are going to cover it before the movie comes out. So between now and July 11th, just know that we're covering All-Star Superman. I just didn't want to dive into something that we were going to have to spend 3 weeks on, because I know typically how long our episodes last. And if I were going to do that, it's a 12-issue arc. So
Yeah,
we'd
it's
have
gonna
to
be a
break it
bit.
down 4 issues, 4 issues, 4 issues works the best for us.
Gonna be a bit.
I do have another one that I am going to break down into 2 weeks, but it's just so we can fully enjoy it and actually savor it. And it's another story that I think it's been brought up. I see it was collected in a box set with All-Star and something else that DC sold at the time, but I think very much so that this is going to be kind of the Superman also that we're going to get. It's another book that's been brought up. I'm pretty positive James Gunn has mentioned it himself.
Okay.
At least a lot of people who love Superman and really are like, this is what, I love the character of Superman and this is why. There's a lot of different panels and things they'll pull from. All-Star Superman is one they bring up a lot. Another one is the one that we're covering today, at least part 1 today, and that is Superman for All Seasons by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. This is not the first time that we have dealt with, you like how it's blocking my face too, that we have dealt with the creative team. Here, I'll go ahead and pass it to you.
Oh, thank you. Hey, look, the magic of the internet.
This is not the first time we've dealt with that creative team of Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. They also did Batman Long Halloween together, which we've covered.
You own?
Yeah, this is
yours?
This is mine. That's my copy. It's a little nicer. It's newer.
I'll teach it. I'll treat it much better.
Well, no, that's
Yeah,
okay. I kind of did dog ear down the bottom left without meaning to.
You can dog ear all you want.
But no, you can treat it however you want to, Mike.
Woo.
So this is another one that I wanted to cover before the Superman movie came out, because this is a story that I didn't really know a lot about going into. I knew it was early on in like Superman's life, but the way it's told and the way that it's presented, it's really good. It was released back in 1998 from September to December of 98, and it's just 4 issues that collect the whole story here. And the reason it's for all seasons is because each issue is a different season. So issue 1 is spring, issue 2 summer, fall, winter, like that. And it came out every month until they ended with a story. Also, along with Jeph Loeb, who wrote it, and then Tim Sale, who was the artist, Richard Starkings, letterer, Bjarne Hansen, colorist, and the editor was Joey Cavalieri. But it's a story from early on in Clark/Superman's life. And the other cool thing about it is each issue is told from somebody else's perspective.
Oh, wow.
So
I like how he looks like the 40s Superman. A big square jaw. His neck is gigantic.
That is the one thing that I will say that I do really love about the Superman comics we're about to cover here with this one here. And I'll go ahead and add issue 1. So we're going to break this down into 2 parts. On this week's episode, we'll cover part 1, which will be spring and summer. And then next week we'll finish up with fall and winter to close it out. But both of these stories, the Superman for All Seasons and then All-Star Superman, have like a Silver Age classic Superman feel to them.
Very much so, yeah. Goodness gracious.
Man, I at least muted on mine.
Age.
Yeah. But
I don't know what that means.
I don't get it either. But you feel them like with the All-Star one, you'll see like different stories kind of come up, and it has that feel very similar to how Grant Morrison, because Grant Morrison did All-Star Superman, very similar to how he did his Batman run too. But that's not what we're focusing on right now.
What strikes me about this as I kind of flip through it is how simplistic yet detailed the art is.
Yes, and I really love that about it.
Yeah, and I know those sound like they cancel each other out, but they really don't. Like for instance, if you look at,
there's a here. I'll flip through with Mike.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, stop. Go back. Stop right there. So, if you look at Superman here or Clark Kent here, you see how simplistic his design is. Like he's just a big behemoth of a man, right? But then you look around, those flowers that are sitting right there, they're so detailed. But he's not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's simplistic yet detailed.
Yeah, Tim Sale really kind of
very well
it's
done.
Like he picks and chooses where to add the detail, and it adds so much to the art. I want to make sure though before Tim Sale passed away 2 years ago, so he's no longer with us. I thought so. On my mom's birthday of all things. But
oh no.
So R.I.P. Tim Sale, but he is also like I talked about, part of the group. This isn't the first time we've covered his work.
Yeah.
He did Long Halloween, which is a completely different art style,
really?
though.
Oh, okay.
I say, like, if you look at that, you can look and be like, okay, I kind of see that. But to me, some of this seems a little more simple. Like,
That's
you can
pretty
tell it's Tim Cell's
amazing
work.
when you run across those guys that can do those different art styles
Yes.
for different things like that. Because, I mean, you look at somebody like Jim Lee, you know, which wonderful artist,
Mhm.
right? But his stuff pretty much looks like
Jim Lee stuff
all the
Yeah,
time.
it's kind of the same way that Todd
Yeah.
McFarlane was.
Yeah. Todd McFarlane was absolutely.
But, and
that way.
honestly,
Yeah.
I guess you can say about everybody, like, you know, a Jack Kirby comic when you see it. So
Yeah, I
artists
mean, they have a
their
style.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. When you run across one that's able to really branch out like that, that's amazing.
Yeah. You know what else I like on these?
It's like being able to
sometimes?
write with both hands. It's like being
Ambidextrous?
ambidextrous.
Yeah. I love a lot of these too. That makes it feel kind of artsy for me is on some of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
And I'm skipping ahead before we get into the
You're
story. It doesn't really have it. It'll show up in my book, but even here, down in the bottom corner, you get a TS 98. Like it makes it feel more like art in a way because he initialed it and dated it down there in the corner.
Yeah.
And again, it's just a whole. But all right, so
that's cool.
Let's go ahead and talk about, as we've already kind of dove into.
Clark didn't have much of an ass there.
No, he is very much. If you were wondering, Superman doesn't have much of a butt.
Got the Hank Hill ass.
He does. So we start off with book 1, which is Spring of Superman for All Seasons, and our first story is told from the perspective of Jonathan Kent, from his dad. So like it starts off with a very much like, you know, folks tend to call him the Man of Steel nowadays. It's also like this. It's told from in a way of like reminiscing, like the narration over it is like these are things that happened in the past away. So it's like somebody be able to look back at it.
I would say it's kind of like letters from home
in a way.
Thing.
Yeah. And he's going on about like, you know, he's the man, he's famous, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, changes the course of mighty rivers faster than a speeding bullet. We knew he was special, but people will talk, you know, believe it or not, there was a time before all that when he was just a man's son.
Yeah, that's cool.
And we get now it's a dual page full out in the comic, but to break it up, it does single page here. Yeah, but it's just it goes, my son, Clark Kent.
Yeah.
And so this is very much we're looking at the human of Superman in this.
Right.
There's not really the way they tackle it is just very I really enjoyed this. So he's out looking for Pa Kent. And the narration over it is him telling the story of essentially how they went and they found the rocket one night. And, you know, he's like, it's crazy to think of it. You know, we drove into the field, sounded, and a baby in a rocket ship, you know, talking about it. But he's got this giant rock that's kind of like stopped him from plowing his field.
Sure.
And Clark's gone out there to tell him like, hey, Dad, like Mom says that dinner's almost ready. This is a senior year of high school Clark Kent, in case you're curious.
Okay.
So 17, 18-year-old, essentially. I mean, I know he ages different than us, but
I got you.
Clark Kent.
He's on Earth, and that's how we judge him. You know, I mean, based like other people.
And it's still the narration of him telling the story about how Martha was hard-headed.
See how detailed his father's face is versus
his. Yeah, it's so. I love the juxtaposition of that though too. Same, even like his arms and his like clothing and everything. But he talks about how Martha was stubborn and wanted to keep him, and he's, you know, finally he felt like he needed to.
I wonder if that's to also give you like a sense of purity.
Maybe,
you know.
Oh, that's a very good idea there too, because that comes up with this kind of too. And he asks if he can help, and he tells him, he's like, you're gonna need this, and he hands him the crowbar, and he just picks it up.
He's like, no,
and he's like, where do you want it? And funny, like he kind of gives him a look of like, come on, like you didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
And like Clark's kind of like, Pa, as he's holding the rock, and he's like, your mother wants us for supper. Come on, we better not keep her waiting. And we see that they're having dinner with the Langs. So that is Lana Lang, her aunt. I think her aunt's name might be Ruth that she lives with. And then
the one with the hat?
Yeah, the one with the hat, the old lady with the hat. And then the Kents that are all there. It talks about springtime in Kansas. Like Clark is finishing up his senior year of high school, and it seemed only like yesterday that he was that baby in the rocket. We see
feeding the dog.
He is. We see Clark and Lana go out for a walk afterwards as he sits there, and he just tells, she's like, hey, like something seems off with you. Is everything okay? And he's like, no, like everything's good. And she's like, well, you tell me like if something was wrong, right? And he's like, yeah, I wouldn't tell like anybody else. There's nobody else I'd tell. I'm good, I promise. But he looks like something's weighing on his head. There's a conversation between like after dinner while they're eating pie out on the front porch, a very Southern thing to do.
Yeah.
Jonathan and Martha are talking and having this conversation of like, his power, like he's changing, like the boy, he's different. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, we knew that this day would come, but like he's starting to grow more powerful. We don't know what he's capable of. Like, I don't regret for a moment of us like taking him from that rocket, but we don't know how to prepare him for any of this.
It's frightening.
Yeah. He's like, there's just so much we don't know. And like every day he becomes stronger with powers and abilities like we don't know anything about. We don't know what these limitations are. We don't know anything about that. And she goes, Jonathan, you don't have enough faith in Clark or in us? And he's like, and she goes, we brought him up right. And he's like, maybe we did, Martha, but I don't. She's like, I don't think he wants to hear it. Like he could hear that. She's like, don't worry about it.
He can hear it all.
Well, but that's a great scene because they don't know that.
Yeah.
Because he like the boy's asleep anyway. His bedroom's clear across the other side of the house anyway. How in the world could he possibly hear what we're talking about? And it shows Clark just sitting there in bed, obviously being able to hear it.
In a very messy room, by the way.
In a very messy room, but like a high school kid's room. So but it's him realizing that like, oh yeah, like they don't know anything about what's going on either.
Yeah.
We're introduced. We get a good look at Smallville. That's Pete Ross. I don't know if you remember his friend Pete Ross.
I don't remember his friend.
He comes up.
Pete Ross.
He's been in some of the older comics too, but in Smallville, like he hung out with Pete and with Lana. It does the whole thing.
Ned Ryerson.
It's very much Ned Ryerson.
Feels like
but it does a great job of just painting the town of Smallville for you to show like everybody knows everybody.
Yeah,
they walk into the general store to order
a very
like
Mayberry type.
Exactly.
Feel. Yeah.
They walk into the general store to like order like shakes or lemonades or something like that, and they sit at the counter
Phosphorus.
There's a card game going on that's
you ever
the
had
same.
A phosphorus?
I haven't.
Okay.
I'll
explain that someday.
All right. I want the mystery to build
my
until
deathbed.
then. Yeah.
I'll explain what a phosphorus
and
is.
like there's a group of 4 men always playing like cards behind them. So it's ongoing. Like it's just a very small town Mayberry field. And it does a good job of showing you that. And Pete's just talking about like, man, I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to make like so much money. That's what I want to do. I want to make $1 million. I want to move to Metropolis and be like that Lex Luthor guy. And like Lana's like,
it was a jump to conclusions, Matt. He made $1 million.
He did. Oh man, the pet rock. But he's just like, that's what I'm gonna do. And Lana's like, you think that this Lex Luthor character is like real? Like we hear about like all this money and stuff, or is he just like they're just talking about things, just giving you a show that like Smallville is way away from Metropolis. Like they're just,
right.
It's things they dream off of.
Right.
Superman has a realization of like, I forgot I have a haircut today. I'm sorry guys, like I gotta go. And in very much of Mayberry Smallville thing, he leaves out of the general store, and it's like he honestly walks right next door to the barbershop.
Sure, yeah.
He sits down, and as he's sitting there waiting for the barber to get to him, and tells him like, "All right, Clark, hey, as soon as I'm done, like I'll get to you." He notices he's able to see through the wall and see Lana and Pete continuing to talk about him.
A lot of people think those powers are cool. It's got to be a nightmare.
Well, and that's like he's having just like, oh wow,
yeah,
I didn't know I could do
that's
this.
what I'm saying. It's got to be a nightmare for you.
So, and we don't know if it's like maybe it's triggered because they're talking about him, because Lana's like, Pete, you think Clark was kind of acting weird today? Like she knows something's up with him. Pete's just like, oh, he's always like that. He lives in his own world, Lana. Like I don't know what you're talking about.
It's just puberty, Lana.
Yeah, and he just like kind of snaps back to it. The barber gets ready to cut his hair, and when he goes, we've had this conversation before.
I did see this when I flipped through.
When he goes to cut his hair,
the
scissors break.
Yeah,
because it becomes to a point of where like what we have here can't cut like his hair and things like that.
How's he get his hair cut then?
He does it himself. Well, I think we talked about John
Floaty?
Byrne had him like use a piece of the shape of the spaceship and use his heat ray off of it to like shave himself.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But the barber's just like, well, man, damnedest thing. You can't make a pair of scissors worth a nickel anymore. He's just thinking it's a bad pair of scissors.
Right.
And Clark's just like kind of mortified by it. And he takes off running home. And Lana's like, there he goes. Where do you think he's going? And there's a funny little mark where they talk about faster than are more powerful than a locomotive. But he outruns the train to like get home to the farm there. And we then cut to Martha on the porch, and she's like, Jonathan? And he's like, what's going on, Martha? And she's like, something's wrong with Clark. He's just been standing out there in that field by himself all alone. Like, and he's like, I'll handle it.
Fucking weirdo. He just goes out in a field and stands.
He's just standing there. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
he's done with a lot, but the way they're like,
Sure.
he's out standing in the field all alone again.
He's outstanding in his field.
And she tells him, like, be gentle. And he's like, okay, I
Uh-huh.
will. And so he walks out there before he can say anything. He just tells him, like, Pa, I'm scared. We don't know what. But then you get like a nice little narration of where he's like, there are things about being a father I'd remember for all my days. Essentially, like how I held him as a baby, all the awkward starts. He talks about it's like carrying a chicken until I finally figured out how to get the hang of it.
There you go.
The morning I found him standing up in his crib for the first time, like I was full of pride. But my son can bend still with his bare hands. And as much as I wanted to tell him, like in that time, like all the answers of life, that all the answers in life and the next could be found in Smallville. All I could promise Clark was that his mother and I would love him always. He's like, I didn't have answers.
That's all
for
you
him.
can do as a parent, honestly.
True, but he just tells him like I didn't have answers for him, so that's all I could tell him. He's like, now I didn't get
Clang, clang went the trolley. By the way,
ding 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 went the bell.
There it is.
I didn't put too much stake in being a church going sort. That was more Martha's way.
Yeah.
Myself, I never doubted that Mother Nature could level the playing field when need be. And we get to see that a storm is coming to Kansas. Obviously, they're part of the Tornado Alley there.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And it's getting dark, and Jonathan's outside, and he's like, Martha, I got to get these animals in the barn. Like, you get below in the storm cellar.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, where's Clark? And he's out there in the field. He was tending to stuff.
He's out wrestling a tornado.
Well, it says, we got to till the land, sow the fields, and reap the bounty, talking about Mother Nature. And it is Clark just staring there.
That's very cool.
Every now and then, there had to be a price. And you see, like, he's watching the twister just kind of tear up farms out there. And it sucks him in, kind of, while he's
Superman
out there.
Not stop a tornado?
Well, I don't know how you stop air. I mean, I guess there's got to be some way.
You got to run the other way.
Well, but
Real
also,
fast.
he's just discovering his powers. He doesn't know how to do that.
All right.
Right? I mean, like, honestly, in the scheme of things, he just found out that his hair couldn't get cut the other day.
That's true.
He's not going to be able to figure out how to take care of a tornado, but it does suck him up in there, and he's trying to figure out, and he's like, Pa, and it takes him into, he's like, I can handle this. I know I can. And he's like riding in the tornado kind of through this. And he sees one of the old men that were playing cards stuck outside by the gas station. There are so few things a person can be really sure of.
So he doesn't know he can fly yet?
No, but I believe in the wild trouble of our moment, our son. And so he sees the man in need.
I love that.
And that he goes, yeah, but I believe in the wild trouble of the moment. Our son became a man. And it shows him like zip through, figuring out he can fly out of the tornado to save the man from.
Well, it was more about his natural reaction.
Exactly.
Than it was anything else.
It's him just like, oh shit, he needs to be saved, and figuring out he can fly to go do it before there's a giant explosion there. And he like lands.
For those of you listening, the gas station explodes, and just the letters GAS are flying up in the air. I think that's
it's beautiful.
Very cool.
Yeah, no, I loved Tim Cell's art on this.
It's a great
and
one.
then he lands kind of on top of the guy and shields him from the blast. And he's telling him while they're like, it's all right, we're going to be all right. And you see the tornado, the destruction it still leaves as it finishes going by. And the guy just looks in shock as he looks at everything else around the town. And he's like, Mr. Klug, are you okay? And he's like, Clark Kent. He's like, my head's still spinning. Like, did you fly down out of? And he's like, no. That twister picked you up like a rag doll too. Like, like, man, look at the town. He's like, he has a moment where he's like, wait, did you fly out of there to say? And then he's just like, no, we just got lucky. Like, thankfully, like,
it's a perfect time to save your first person, right? Because there's so much going on.
It is. And you see the destruction of Smallville.
The guy didn't even trust his eyes.
Yeah. And Clark's just like, I've got to get home. And he rushes back home.
Yeah.
Like their tractor's on top of the roof, and his parents are safe out of the storm cellar. And he's like, Pa, Ma, and they're like, Jonathan's like, no need to shout, son. They can hear you in the next county. And there's a nice little just giant like hug moment that everything's okay. And it shows like he flies to help get the tractor up off the roof and stuff. And he goes, you should see what it looks like in town. I can't help thinking I could have done more, is what Clark tells them.
Well, that's kind of Superman's deal, right?
Is that he always feels like he can do more.
Yeah.
That's the thing I heard somebody say once that I thought was a very good point. And I might have brought it up on the show before. And it's like, part of the problem and the downside of being Superman is that you can hear everybody in trouble, but you can't save them all.
That's what I'm saying about the nightmare part. I mean, it's just got to be a nightmare.
So,
Because I would think that's the thing you have to train the most.
oh,
Is
absolutely.
not to look through everything, not to hear everything, not to try to save everyone on the planet all the time.
Yeah.
You know?
No, exactly. Jonathan says what he said, like that look in his eyes, I could have done more.
I heard
He's
that
like,
siren and I really thought it was you opening your bottle.
oh.
I thought it was just going.
He goes, I know my son, it would haunt him from that day on.
Yeah.
Which, like we said, that's one of the things of being Superman.
Mhm.
It's always feeling you could do more. There's a really nice, well, I say really, I really enjoyed this part. He's like there at the church and he's speaking with the pastor. And he's like, Pastor Lindquist, do you have a few moments? And he's like, yeah, sure, Clark, for you. Like, I always have time for you and your family. You are so nice and stuff like that. As long as you don't mind me, like, looking after things here as we go. Like, I got to walk and talk. And he goes, the Lord may have given us the tools, but it's man who has to fix it. Like, talking about all the damage around here.
Sure.
And he goes, and leaving Tom Landers in charge of anything. Well, son, like, it's just very like small town.
Yeah.
While he's there.
Why are preachers' jackets always too big?
I don't know, but especially in this one.
That one's huge.
It is. It swallows
like
them
the
up.
Talking Heads video.
And he goes, actually, I don't know, Pastor, about anything like that Twister graduation. Like, I don't know what to do, what to talk to. And he's like, well, have you talked to your folks about it? Like, there's a great comfort in that. And he's like, sure, but Pastor, what if just one man could have stopped all this destruction? And he didn't. Like, I really love this conversation here because it just kind of gives you an intro.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, we each do what we're able to, Clark, like some less, some more. But when the Almighty sets a course, there's nothing any man can do about it. And Clark just still kind of looks at him dead. He goes, but what if there was one? And he's like, Tom, please. I'm sorry, Clark. Like, I got to go.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like him just having that moment of like, again, like, what if I could have done more?
Yeah.
And I didn't. He goes and he graduates from Smallville.
Right.
In the spring, and they have like a party to celebrate it. One night after that, after graduation, he takes Lana out and he's like, hey, I have a secret that I want to show you. Like, this may be impulsive, but like, close your eyes. And he essentially, like, he shows her, like, he flies with her because she's the one person in his life, aside from his parents, that he feels like he can share stuff with.
Well, he trusts her.
Exactly. And she's like, wait, what's happening, Clark? What's going on? And he like flies with her through, like, there, it's the pull out or the full spread. Will you please just trust me? I can fly.
That patented Clark Kent ass
It
right
is
there in the frame.
so flat. He's like, he tells, like, I don't know like what it is, but these powers are like a gift. And she's like, Clark, if you hadn't shown me, like, I wouldn't know how to understand this. This is all believable. And he's like, and if I can find a way, like, I'm not sure, but I want to like help as many people as possible. And she's like, yeah, but in order to do that, you'll have to leave Smallville. And he's like, I can come back though, and I will come back. Like, I'll come back for you. Like, I got to help people. And she kisses him for this. And then we flash forward a little bit.
Jesus, he's so big.
He's so big
compared to his mother. And
she's
swing.
so tiny. And that dog, look at the dog
Lord.
down there. And she's telling him, like, remember, you can do anything you set your mind to as long as you believe. And she, with all your heart. And he's like, I know, Ma, I will. And it's like Jonathan, as he's like talking about not wanting to see him leave and saying his goodbyes to him as he gets ready to leave Smallville. This is another full panel one that it doesn't do justice, me splitting it up. But Clark walks out there and just goes, you ever get tired of looking at this? And it's like just this fantastic like sunset. And he's like, no, never. Guess I never will. And it's a nice moment between he and his dad. And then it flashes to Metropolis where it says time passes. The country mouse leaves Smallville and becomes a city mouse. I never cared for Metropolis much. Can't see the horizon unless you're flying over it. Maybe that's why Clark chose to settle there after all. And we are then introduced to the Daily Planet and Perry White. And it's like, this people is what our readers want. And the more we give them, the more they want. Am I clear? And so now we see Lois there, Crystal, and on it, Chief. Jimmy Olsen's actually like a little cub reporter in here, though. Then, sure, Mr. White.
That's what Jimmy Olsen should look like.
Yeah.
Right there.
Afterwards, Clark's like, say, Lois, if you don't have any plans tonight, I was wondering if, and I do love this out of Lois. Sorry, Smallville. I already have plans with Lex. No matter what Perry thinks, Luthor still makes pretty damn good copy. Like talking about Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
And it says, as Lois Lane, his rival reporter, Clark has his work cut out for him. And then I love our introduction to Superman because we haven't seen him as Superman yet. and we do to close out book 1. And it's Lex letting Lois out of the car. And he's like, join me for a nightcap. And she's like, I had a lovely evening, Lex. And he goes, I sense a butt coming. And you just get a whoosh that goes by. And you see the
Superman's
blue,
butt.
red, and yellow streak.
Yeah.
So it's Superman. And it just blows his hat off. And Luthor is annoyed. And I love how we see already from the beginning that Lex Luthor is annoyed by this. Because it's just turning to see where his hat was blown off. And she's like, but I've got an early deadline. And I have, and I've got a hat to catch, and you've got a hat to catch, is what she tells him. And it's a kid chasing a cat off like this edge, like outside of his building. And it's like he's about to fall off, and Superman comes by and swoops him up. And he's like, gotcha. And the kid looks up to him as he hands him his hat, and he goes, wow, cool costume. The kid looking up at Superman, and Superman just looks down and goes, thanks. My mom made it for me.
That's cool.
And then we close out book 1 as he's flying across, and we get the narration from Jonathan. At the end of the day, I'm not sure we're all that different from any other parents. We worry about our son, eating the right things, that he's making friends, and that'll stay out of harm's way, even if he's Superman. But we get Luthor just drinking wine as he watches him fly, kind of fly by, which is very much that same look on his face that Nicholas Hoult has in the trailers, Lex.
Right.
And his driver's like, will there be anything else, Mr. Luthor? And he just says, it's going to be a long, hot summer. And that takes us to our second book, which is the last thing we'll cover for the episode today.
I bet it's summer.
Oh, Mike, you're correct. It is summer.
Look at me.
You want to guess who narrates or who is in charge of book 2 for us?
Book 2 is going to be, is it Luthor? Or is
Not
it
yet.
His mom?
Luthor does have one. This is Lois.
Oh, well.
Lois Lane is responsible, and I love the way she opens this too. Perry once told me, I'm going to read her narration as we go in interest.
Perry once told me.
I'm not going to do a voice for it.
Okay.
Here's the thing, is when I love Lois Lane as a character, and when she is done well, she is very well.
Sure.
The Lois that we cover on World's Finest Wednesday, which
That's
we have
different.
another one coming up.
Entirely different.
We have a Lois coming up this Wednesday
That's a ditzy dumb Lois.
oh man, that all she's concerned about is marrying Superman. That's
Yeah.
that's not my
There's
Lois
a lot
Lane.
of that going around.
Hashtag not my Lois Lane. But those stories are hilarious, so that's why I cover them.
Yeah.
So this Lois Lane is my Lois Lane. I like this Lois. So it says, Perry once told me, Lois, a reporter lives by 3 rules: believe none of what you hear, half of what you see, and everything you write. I'm a writer, or a newspaper man, as Perry would put it.
Super crotch.
A damn good one by anyone's standards. It's where the page cut for those listening to audio. No, I just need for those just listening to audio to know why you just yelled out super
Yeah,
crotch
all
in
we
the
can see
middle
is
of it.
Superman's crotch for the most
Just because
part.
it's split of the page. But it says, or a newspaper man, as Perry would put it, a damn good one by anyone's standards, and mine are pretty high. I like Perry's rules. They make sense. Strike that. They made sense to me, because now those rules fall under the same category. It's all BS.
Look, it's my Superman
Before
impersonation.
Superman. That is kind of his face there as he flies by. But he's happy and
He
cheerful.
looks like he's trying to squeeze one out.
He says,
what
"Good
he
morning,
looks-
Metropolis," as he flies by. Well, that's the thing. He looks very like stoic and like movie star-esque as Superman. So she talks about how Superman
He's really just a small town kid.
He is just Smallville. But that's the thing, is you get that's the beauty of the character, is it comes out so much in this that he is just still a kid figuring it all out.
Yeah.
Lois goes on and on about like Collins over at the Star tried to name him the Metropolis Marvel, but it sounded more like a professional wrestler. Jimmy kept angling for Mighty Man, and I told the kid to stick to taking pictures. Yeah, she goes, you know what I really wanted to call him? Too Good to Be True, which is a nice little what? Mike didn't like that.
I don't like that one either.
That's fine. Here's the thing. She still might be into Superman a little bit, but she's not into the way that.
When you say Mighty Man, I think of 2 things.
Mighty Mouse?
One is for some reason, it's not even associated, the Chuck Wagon commercial where the little tiny Chuck Wagon goes through the kitchen and the dogs are chasing it. Don't know how that's in my head.
Yeah, I don't get that either.
And then the second one now escapes me. So there you go. No, it's the Mighty Heroes. Did you ever watch Mighty Heroes?
No, I don't know what Mighty Heroes is.
Yeah, with like Rope Man and Cuckoo Man, and
I think we might have talked about them
Yeah,
before. They were like the super globetrotter powers, is what it sounds like. They have.
for the most part, yeah.
But she talks about how like he can do all these things. Like he flies, he can see through walls, he
Who
can
threw
lift
a
up
tampon
cars.
at him?
He can bounce off bullets off his chest, and that's the part that gets me. Like he can do anything he wants to.
Yeah.
And he decides to do what? Like be a hero? Like she just can't like fathom that. Like why? Which is a kind of like, and I don't think she's asking it in some cynical way of like,
Well,
who
she's
may-
also hanging out with Lex Luthor, so that may be poisoning her.
Well, I
reasoning a
also
bit
also
here.
like to think that she's a journalist. Think of all the shit she has to
Oh
cover.
no, I
and
get it.
that's
I get
just
it. Yeah. She's
hardened by it, and you're just like,
Yes.
why? So why is he? And it kind of fits with her. That's why I always love in a way that she calls him Smallville, because it fits in this view that she has of Superman
yeah.
here too. Of like,
Yeah.
why is he helping everybody then? Like, I don't.
Yeah.
He could do anything, and that's what he chooses to do. Like, we live in a world where nobody sticks their neck out. Like, that's all I write about all day long. Is like we lie to each other, we brutalize each other, we kill each other. And here's this guy, like this man, sticking his neck out for everyone. But like, why? That's a very good point.
Yeah.
What is it? Oh, she compares him to Santa Claus, and she goes, it's almost like he knows if we've been good or bad, so you got to be good for goodness sake.
Well,
And I'm sorry, I've been a reporter far too long to start believing in Santa
she's
Claus.
not that far off.
Yeah. And yet, when my sister Lucy and I were little girls, like we both believed in, was a dashing man who rode a white horse and had a gold crown and a cape. A cape. His name was Prince Charming.
Yeah.
She goes, over the years, I'm disappointed to say that I've met a lot of men. Some were dashing, some rode white horses, and some even wore crowns. And when it does this, like, I love the way they do this because it shows Luthor over the part even wore crowns, where he's like, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is adjourned, because Superman, the whole time Lois is giving this, Superman is going out through Metropolis, like saving people and doing things as she's, all right, I take that back. He is stopping this giant nuclear missile from being shot at Metropolis from this submarine, where he goes and he takes it out to space for it to explode and not to hurt anybody, while she's giving this monologue of like Superman must be too good to be true. She's showing you him sticking his neck out to save the city of Metropolis, or the story is. And as he flies by, like, somebody notifies Lex Luthor and he adjourns the meeting that he's in. But it also falls with the narration from Lois, where it's like some even wore gold crowns, talking about how Lex has everything.
Lex looked like he ate a lemon.
He does, but then it shows Superman underwater trying to find where their sub is.
Well, he's talking to fish.
He is. That's
Like
Aquaman's
Aquaman.
thing. But to wear a cape and not look stupid, that's somebody interesting, is what she points out.
That's true.
And Superman finds the submarine that shot the warhead kind of at them. And the captain there is like, nobody move. Like, everybody stay your ground. Like, you'll be shot if you try to like desert. Somebody does still try to leave there. We see a cutout there in the back.
Uh-huh.
And it cuts to,
That was a woman, right? I mean,
it was a woman.
Yeah.
Lean.
Okay.
It cuts to the Metropolis Air Base where Lex Luthor pulls up. It says, one night Jimmy and I were working in the graveyard shift, getting out the last edition, the Bulldog, as Perry would put it.
What does Lex do in this world? Oh, I'm
Well,
fixing to find out.
well, no,
Okay.
no, he has like Lex. He has his own building, like his
Right,
own
I
company and
understand
stuff.
the LexCorp thing, but I don't know what the hell he does.
It doesn't go into like, oh, he makes like
He grinds up
shower
toddlers.
TVs. Yeah, like there's not, but he has like his own company and all this.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of,
sure.
but they talk about like they were putting together this issue, and we were bored and
DJ.
tried, and we tried to figure out how much Lex Luthor makes. In other words, and they talked about our best guess, $150 a second is how much Lex Luthor makes.
Arts.
In other words, if Lex Luthor found a $100 bill lying on the street, it wouldn't be worth his time to stop and pick it up.
Wow.
Is what she kind of
Okay.
tells him, of just how, like, right?
Yeah.
He pulls up
It's a lot of money.
at an Air Force base, and they let him through.
Right.
So it goes to show you just how much pull Luthor has here in Metropolis. And as he gets there,
Did you lose a sub?
Superman is landing on the Air Force base with the sub there. And he's
Yeah.
like, stay back. I don't want anyone to get hurt. And they're all pointing like, way to go, Superman. That
Jeez,
guy's
man.
a one-man army, like everybody. And he is happy to see it. And he rips open the hull of the submarine.
Wow.
And he's like, all right, I suggest you all surrender, or I guess you guys, I can give you an alternate. And he shows that everybody's already there with guns already like pointed at him. And Superman goes, all right, General, you want to handle it from here? And he's like, with pleasure, Superman. As he goes to leave, Luthor in typical Luther
He
form.
starts unloading his gun.
No, he's just like, hold it right there. You can't leave that thing on the tarmac and have U.S. taxpayers clean up after your grandstanding. He's like, you can't just sit there. That's what Luther's yelling at him. And
Shut up, Luther.
Superman doesn't. He's just like, Luther.
Pick up that $100 bill.
But one of
Uh-oh.
the captains in there goes like, Superman, you may have stopped our nuclear missile from destroying your beloved metropolis, but you can't stop the nations of the world from seeing the truth and that you're an American imperialist whose presence tipped the balance of power too far. And it's like,
He's got a point.
you know who he has there? That's Lois Lane.
Oh,
That's who is trying to
no.
get off the ship. And she's like, Superman, can you get at least this guy to shut up? And he's like, try it. And you can see, or we'll see if you really are faster than a speeding bullet. And he clicks the gun.
Yeah.
And there's a really great scene here. It shows the terrorists with Lois, and then it's Luther and Superman standing beside each other on the opposite side of them. And Lex goes, I'll handle this, Lois. I can negotiate with anyone, even Terrorist. And it's 3 different panels. And him saying that, you just see a streak of blue and yellow, and it goes and takes the gun from him in that time. And he goes, Luther, the situation's under control, as he just crushes the gun in his hand.
Yeah.
So then, as that guy's kind of taken aback, Lois being Lois, heel down in his foot, elbow to the gut, chop right to the back of the neck, and she takes care of the guy who was holding her hostage, because Lois can hold her own.
Oh, sure.
And he goes, and thank you, Miss Lane, for her being able to take care of the last one. Luther's like, Lois, after all this time, you still never cease to surprise me. Come now, I'll have the limo drop you back at the planet so you can start right away on your thrilling story. And she goes, actually, Lex, I think Superman was about to offer me a lift. I'm on a deadline and every second counts. And he's happy to help you, Miss Lane. So he picks him up to fly her off.
It's amazing what saving you from certain death will do.
And he goes, Luther, the missile and guidance system on board that sub were manufactured by LexCorp.
Whoa.
If I find out that your fingerprints were anywhere near what happened today, and he's like, how dare you? It's those kind of slanderous and false. And he just kind of flies off with her. And Luther's like, I'm talking to you. So it's the man who has control over everything, who has no control over Superman.
It's all ego.
It is.
Yeah.
And so he flies up with her and takes her away and flies her back to the planet. And she's like, bit of advice, Superman.
The Daily Planet.
While all those people down there look up to you, even adore you, nobody, and I mean nobody, speaks to Lex Luthor the way you did. Mm-hmm. And he goes, well, then maybe it's about time somebody did.
Oof.
And she flies off and he goes, good luck with your story, Lois. And she just says, damn you, as he flies off. We get
I'm gonna have to call a little bit of BS right here, though.
Okay, we're almost done with something
because that dude looks just like freaking Superman. Those glasses are not enough.
He doesn't have the smolder going on. You made fun of his face earlier. He doesn't have the smolder.
The size of his head.
And she's just sitting there thinking, as she rides down the elevator to her office, like what it is that enthralls her. She's just like, it's got to be the cape. Like that's what it is about it. Because we have the story she told at the beginning of like what's fascinating her. And she gets off the elevator and Clark's there and he's like, oh, hello, Lois. Anything going on I should know about? And she just goes, only the whole wide world, Smallville, and just keeps on passing him by. That's part of it though, too. He might look like it, but I would argue that she is infatuated with Superman. And she thinks that Clark Kent is just like, he's this small town boy that I got to keep up with. I got to, kind of carry his load here too. She's not looking at him like that. So
carry his load, all right.
By the way, how did you get aboard that submarine anyhow? And she goes, what? We all have our little secrets, Clark. I'm sure even you do, as she walks away, which is a nice little tease there. And it says the problem, of course, Lois is giving our narration over it. The problem, of course, with the whole Prince Charming thing is that it's a recipe for disaster. A woman has this ideal man in mind, and since no such man exists, no man can ever live up to that standards. And then along comes Superman and screws everything up. And it shows a look of him in his apartment that's just small and like it's more well put together, but it is a small, tiny apartment that Superman lives in.
It is very small, but it looks a lot like his room.
It does, very much so. Just clean.
I know that shot is set up to look that way.
He's just eating like a peanut butter sandwich, like laying in bed there.
Yeah.
There's just so much about him that we don't know. Where does he come from? Like, where does he's not keeping a bridge from collapsing or stopping a train from derailing or answering a children's cry. As a reporter, it's maddening. As a woman, forget it. He goes back out. She talks about Clark has this theory that Superman slips off to some kind of fortress of solitude. This from a man who starts his day with cornflakes. Like she's just, just shining him there.
Well, and she just sees him as a little tiny guy.
Well, I do like this too. The whole
small town guy.
fortress of solitude in this instance is him just going back home to Smallville.
Yeah. Well, I think that's always been.
Yeah, and so that's what it is. And like it's Clark out in the field, and Jonathan's like, can you stay for supper? And he's like, how'd you know it was me? Mud on city shoes have a certain sound to them. That's kind of what he tells him. And it's like a fortress of solitude. I wonder if it has a drawbridge, and it's just this nice giant picture of Kansas and him hugging his dad. They're saying like, welcome home. You look good, son. And so it's him having dinner with his parents as he's just like catching up on things. Like, and he tells them like, air conditioners everywhere, Pa. It's like they don't even notice it's summer. Like it's him still just like a little kid in a big city.
Yeah, sure.
And he's like, Shelby's really getting older, talking about the dog. And his mom's like, she's fine. Did you come to visit for any reason? And he's like, well, I don't know. I'm just kind of lonely, I guess. Like that's the thing. He's still the same old farm boy, even as Superman in Metropolis. He still gets lonely. He still feels like he doesn't fit.
Sure.
Still wants to go home and see his parents. And they're like, well, then you stay with us as long as you want to. And he goes to like check on Lana, find out that Lana's not there in Smallville anymore, that Lana's left. Yeah. Her aunt's no longer alive, and Lana kind of bounced around and moved, so he can't go see.
He finds the priest, right, or the preacher, or whatever.
Who's taking care of the house.
Up. Yeah,
he catches up and tells him that like Lana's not there. He's like, she's been gone ever since you left, Clark. Don't mind telling you that a lot of people thought that she ran off with you, kind of thing. But we haven't seen her. And he's like, no, I haven't seen Lana in years. And then the preacher's like, we're proud of you, Clark. And he's like, me? He's like, you betcha. We're probably the only town in Kansas that gets the Daily Planet every morning in the general store. Like they're like, we're proud of you for being this newspaper writer.
Yeah.
He's thinking, and it's a nice kind of thing in a way of like everybody in his hometown's like proud of him for being the guy that's writing for the newspaper there.
Yeah.
He's like, you're famous, Clark. Nobody from Smallville has ever done anything like that. And it's again, I like the juxtaposition. He goes to the general store. He sees Pete. He sees that things in Smallville are still kind of the way they are. There's that card game there in the back still going on. And they go to order lemonades, and the guy behind the counter is like, these are on me, Mr. Big City Reporter. Like it's him like fitting in and just, having a nice little time there. But Pete says,
picture of them there at the bar also, it's very Norman Rockwell.
Oh, very much so. Pete asks Clark while he's talking, though, he's like, no offense, Kent, but I thought it'd be me who would get up Metropolis and be a billionaire like Lex Luthor. Hey, you ever met Lex Luthor, by the way? And Clark looks at him and goes, yes. He puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. Like he's very much not about any of this Lex Luthor bullshit to anybody.
He is not impressed.
Yeah, there's a nice little moment of him sitting with his mom out on the back porches. He's sitting there talking, asking how it was to be with Pete. He says, like, sometimes I just feel so out of place in the big city, and I've always thought that Smallville felt like home, but now it's different here too. Like I just don't feel like I belong anywhere, kind of.
Well, they've moved on also.
Yeah, they have, and so he's kind of stuck between areas. I don't think he ever felt like he belonged anywhere. Obviously, that's part of Superman's story too. And she's like, it's all part of growing up, Clark. It isn't always easy. It isn't always fun, but you'll find your own way. You always have. Then we see there's this giant fire going on at Kimco Labs. It's the last day of summer. This is the last couple pages, and we'll close out this week's episode. It's the last day of summer when the story comes over the wire. Perry sends Jimmy and me out just past midnight. Kimco Labs is a young upstart company that, rumor has it, LexCorp is looking to buy. This is one hostile takeover Lex isn't going to get to enjoy. I go right to work looking for a hook on the story. Immediately, there's the environment angle, but Perry wants something sexy to be front page.
Uh-oh.
And what we see is then there's these guardians of the city that are LexCorp's latest attempt to move the spotlight off of Superman. He's made these robots or these people in these suits to be able to go out and protect the city, so they don't need Superman. Lex can take care of all this.
Right, sure.
He goes, but it's typical Luthor. Send in drones, no personality, no independence. Just do the job and let LexCorp take the credit. I'm looking for something sexy. Give me, he goes, and he's giving me laundry detergent. I'll wind up on page 9.
Yeah.
But Suddenly it happens. What every reporter waits for. I have my hook, and Superman shows up, and the bots tell Superman, LexCorp has the situation under control, Superman. Everyone's been evacuated. We suggest you leave the scene. And Superman grabs it and just flings it behind him. And he goes, tell your boss, I don't have time for this. If you want to help, at least do it right. Because he notices there's a woman still trapped inside.
Right.
So he goes in and he saves this woman. And it goes, we moved from page 9 to the front page in one moment. I have my story, the human element that sells newspapers. And it's him rescuing this woman. He's like, Miss? And she's like, who? Superman, because she's passed out from like the inhalation from the chemicals and the smoke. And he like wraps her up in his cape and he takes her out and he lays her down and he tells him like she's inhaled a lot of smoke. So y'all be careful. And he leaves to go back to see if there's anybody else. And the woman's just like, bless you.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm only going to ask you once, clear the area, telling all the other like
robots
to get out of the way.
the sentries.
And he goes, I'm going to put this fire out. And he ends up doing that because it goes, I love that. It goes, my heart races. I tell my eyes to believe only half of what I see, but I have my lead. And I love, we talked about it before with one of the stories we covered of how they would take the taglines from old Superman stuff and use it. And it's this is a job for Superman.
There you go.
As he's sitting there like sprawled out with all the fire
like crazy.
And he spins around to put it all out. And he takes the fire away from the chemical lab there with him because of it. Perry would say, I've lost my objectivity, and he's probably right, but I've got my front page story. And so Lois goes to interview the woman who was rescued as Superman he goes, go home with your tail between your legs. A woman almost died because y'all were careless.
He's talking to
the robots there.
Whatever,
he goes, and if it happens again, I will hold Luthor responsible personally. Like I will hold him personally responsible.
Sure.
Lois goes to interview and she goes, Miss Vaughn, if there's anything you would say to Superman, what would it be? And she goes, and now I have my headline, and we get he's my angel. So
he's not gonna like that.
No, and we see the headline there as in the car seat as it's Luthor reading the headline, and he goes to get out of the limo, and the driver goes, she's in apartment 3G. Would you like me to go get her? And he goes, no, this requires a personal touch. And Luthor gets out of the stairs and starts walking up the stairs, and he goes, a walk up in this day and age? And he pushes on a button for a nameplate that says Vaughn.
Right.
And he goes, the things I do for this city. And he introduces himself to a woman. Miss Vaughn, I'm Lex Luthor. I know who, and she goes, I know who you are. And he goes, well, then I've read about your fascination with Superman and how you are a gifted chemist. And she goes, Superman? He's my angel, you know. I dream about him every night. And then it shows us her wall.
Oh my God.
Where everything is covered with Superman stuff, including signs that are like, welcome to Metropolis.
No.
You are now leaving Metropolis, home of Superman. And
she has a shrine.
She does. And Luthor says, then together, my dear, we can help Superman in ways you've only dreamed of. And that closes out the narration with Lois. There isn't a day when I don't think about Perry's 3 rules. And even though Superman flies in the face of them, literally, as long as I believe everything I write, I'll sign my name to it. By Lois Lane.
Wow.
And that closes out our summer issue and our issue for today of part 1 of Superman.
Yeah, I didn't expect
Superman for all seasons.
I didn't expect the shrine there at the end.
No, it
I just
kind of
know where that goes.
Well, I'll tell you, because it goes in a very interesting place, because when we pick it up next week, our last 2 issues are I'll say I'm not going to tell you the next one is, but we'll get into fall, which is told from Lex Luthor.
So it's spring, summer.
Winter, we have fall and winter coming up.
Okay,
then
fall and winter.
And fall is told from Lex Luthor's
Can't imagine
perspective.
winter's great.
It's cold.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, winter is usually one of those, coming of doom kind of things.
I like the way they
winter is coming.
I like the way they use winter. Something happens in fall that sets up winter.
Hodor.
So we'll be able to look at that. But there you go. That is part 1 of Superman for all seasons.
That's a great series.
Oh, it's good. I love the art.
Really good. Can I say one thing here?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a quote on the front of this by Miles Millar and Alfred Goh, I guess.
Okay.
They are the creators and executive producers of Smallville. It says, combines the scope and pathos of a John Ford film with an intimate portrait of a superhero. Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale have found a truly original approach to tell a legendary story. This book is a milestone for Superman. I love the
John
the
Ford.
juxtaposition of the John Ford thing. Yeah, I think that's very cool
Well-
because John Ford it's old time westerns and good guys, bad
Yeah.
guys, that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's the thing too, is there's
White hats,
not
black hats.
there's not a lot of action in this, but it is
Yeah.
a really good
Yeah.
story.
Well, if you look at some of the old John Ford movies, there's not a ton of action in those either.
True.
It's more about the relationships.
I got you.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're gonna, and we're gonna get more of that next week. So there you go. That was part 1.
Yeah.
Next week on Monday,
Very
we will
cool.
have part 2 of Superman for All Seasons. This Wednesday, I talked about Lois Lane earlier. Mason's gonna join us, and we're gonna talk about that time that we talked about Lana Lang here too tonight.
Yeah.
Or today, whenever you're listening to this. Both Lana and Lois getting up to some more shenanigans trying to marry good old Superman. And we'll talk about that next week, though. I'll even tease next week's for both. We'll go ahead and have part 2 here of Superman for All Seasons. And next Wednesday, Superboy is going to go back in time and try to prevent the assassination of Abraham. Prevent the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, Mike.
Yeah, I love that.
And
That's going to turn out
who
well.
might show up? Maybe it's Lex Luthor.
Oh.
So we're going to get into all of that. So you got a lot of great stuff to look forward to. First on Wednesday, Lois trying to trick Lana Lane into marrying some dude named, what was it? Impartial? No, it was
I-Man.
yeah, it was an I. I don't know. It was a different hero that came to
Indigo
town.
Man.
He wanted to call all of his strength and stuff Marvo something
Inca
instead
Man.
of like, no, that's not super strength. It's Marvo strength. Oh, come on, dude.
Ignatius Man.
Anyway, that has been our episode for the day. As always, make sure to check out Rogue Media Network and all the other great podcasts on the Rogue Media Network family of podcasts. As always, I can't thank you guys enough for taking the time out to watch, to listen, to comment, to subscribe, to everything you do. I appreciate it so much, and I can't say thank you enough.
Thank you.
But now you know. Until next week when we finish out the story, stay safe, everybody.
Oh, shit. Golly con.
Pros and heroes. Gonna tell you about pros and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.